Andrew, why do you think that evil doesn't exist?
Well, because I'm a dummy, Garrett. No, it's not
like I assume it's not that simple, but like, what do you mean when you're saying that? Like, why are you saying that to me?
Yeah, well, I think it really is where, and I guess I should say is I hold most of the stuff I say very loosely, you know, because I believe truth, like we've talked about, is like a moving target. It's like kind of a path that we're on. We're trying to keep blazing it and trying to find it and trying to hit it and everything. And so, you know, I hold anything that I say to, it could be foolish and wrong, and I might turn and go the other way the next moment, like literally. So, but this creeping sensation about evil not really being real was, it kind of hit my mind whenever I was like, well, if you remove like all the humans, what happens to evil? And then you have this idea, like this kind of weird cosmic, like angelic realm or whatever. But even then you're kind of like, okay, what is that? Like, what does it mean for like angels to be evil? And then you go, okay, well, Satan tried to take over the throne. It's like, okay, and that's evil. It's like, that doesn't really translate. Well, I mean, I know you can probably go into some complexities and go into how it can translate down on lower levels, but
I think
that was,
I mean, part
thing.
of like, so even where you're going with that kind of really depends on how you read the kind of the ancient stories about angels and demons and stuff too, because I know, I don't know. I really don't feel like I understand Peugeot's position after all, because every time I listen to him, I get confused again. I'm like, wait, I thought like, I was getting the sense that he was like kind of, you know, just saying these things exist sort of as symbols or almost as metaphor or as like.
Yeah. Now he believes they're actual beings in a weird way, and you can't
it's
really,
like, and then it's just, I don't even know what a being is, and that's so confusing. Yeah. I mean, but it comes down to that. It's like, what's a being? But yeah, so you're saying if human beings, if all being exists basically in the human consciousness, or if the human consciousness is sort of what like creates the universe, then, you know, if all the humans are gone, then all the evil's gone, but also all the everything's gone. Like nothing exists. If like, that's just if a tree falls in the forest and you didn't hear it, did it really make a sound? Like, it's just that question, because it's just wondering whether or not anything exists, whether or not you're perceiving it.
Well, yeah, and like, and of course there's like the whole problem of natural evil, like, you know, a mudslide taking out a village and killing a bunch of, you know, villagers, and a lot of people go, that was God's judgment, and maybe who knows, but people will attribute also like, oh, that was Satan, or that was evil, you know, or like a kid getting cancer, that's evil. While that's very sad and it's terrible, right, I wouldn't necessarily go the step to say it's evil, because it's not like, well, that's a malfunction in nature.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I don't even know if it's a malfunction, because I was thinking earlier about, like,
well,
as far
as a feature that's abused, maybe, or something. I don't know, something like that.
I mean, is an earthquake an abuse of like who's abusing something? Like, it's built into the system.
It's a natural pattern. Yeah. Well, see, this is okay. This is where I'm going to go on one of my rambles. Stop me if you need an explanation. But I was literally just talking about this, not even thinking about this conversation, but it just happened to flow out. But okay, so I believe that being is, and I've talked to you, and I don't want to, I guess I might have to explain all the weird stasis and novelty and manifestation crap, but pretty much that God is like this, is this pattern, and everything is completely and totally imbued with this pattern. And as it goes down, and this is where I agree with some, and hopefully people don't get freaked out when I say like Gnosticism, is that I believe in this principle of emanation, where like, as the pattern goes down, it does dilute. And as it dilutes, that's when these other lesser principalities, which you could say the Satan is a principality or some kind of pattern that's, you know, been denigrated as it goes down, as it copies itself down. And then, of course, through that pattern coming down, eventually you get matter and stuff, and that matter bumps around into each other and creates planets, and then the planets throw up beings after billions of years of this thing going round, round, and round. And then, and now we have, and that's kind of what I understand about like beings, is like these weird aberrant patterns somehow in hierarchy. And I don't know, that still doesn't really explain, you know, explain being. I guess we'd have to, I've been thinking about what being is. In my mind, it's like in this God, like kind of like the Father, Holy Spirit, Son, it's almost like being exists in like relationship somehow, or you know, it's the relationship of things together somehow, or but that's just an intuition or a feeling. I don't have like
but I think
scholarly wisdom or scholarly teaching to say anything about it.
I think the phenomenological position is just that, like anything exists because it only begins to exist in relationship to something else. Like a chair isn't a chair until it's something that you could sit on, right? Yeah. It's like, if there's nobody on the earth to experience the earth, is it really being on earth? Or if there's nobody to commit any sins, do any of those sins exist? It's kind of getting back to that original question, but
yeah, that's interesting. But anyways, this kind of gets wild, but in the pattern, like, so I believe that in that way that God is like a simple consciousness, like that is consciousness at a simplistic level. And then so all these other are these subsequent patterns that maybe are, you know, lessened through the copying, or as it goes down in the hierarchy, they're not as strongly, so they can be, you know, as it stacks together in these hierarchies, there can be malignance or some kind of, you know, failure in the copy. And so what I would think that like the devil is a pattern that sees itself as the whole, but it is actually within the pattern. So
right. Okay.
And then that gets you to like say, oh, so Satan tried to ascend the throne, you know, so but what it is it's kind of a malfunctioning part of the pattern where it's like, no, I am the pattern. And then it tries to subject other patterns like beneath it in a way. And then that's why you could say, okay, you know, Satan's the god of this world. It's like, because at least until Christ, I guess, puts all principalities under his footstool or under his feet. I mean, what I think about that, I think that he's kind of, you know, the nails in the coffin, you know, all these principalities are under him. But what that means to me is that through his self-sacrifice, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, this pattern loop was like completed. You know, it starts here and it goes down, and then through Christ, it's closed. It's like now all these patterns are only able to serve the meta pattern, even in their abhorrence, or even in their trying to go one way or the other. Like that even serves the meta pattern. There's no escaping it. Like even us, and like no matter, and that's why it says every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. Like it doesn't matter. We will all play out this pattern. Mm-hmm. It's like and that kind of sounds deterministic. That kind of sounds like kind of Calvinistic-y and stuff like that. But I don't know. That's kind of where I've been thinking at a lot. But that's kind of where these lesser patterns come down, you know, or that I see it. And then that becomes like the devil, or you can see like in ourselves, like the demon of gluttony is like this pattern rogue that's like, eat. One
of the ways I've thought about that a lot is that like, even thinking about, and I don't know what religions or what versions of Christianity are going to agree with this interpretation or what won't, but like, I think of like the difference between angels and demons, or even the difference between like, I forget who I heard talking about it, but just the idea that like all the kind of Greek gods, or just various other pantheons of deities that existed in different mythologies, they kind of represented different patterns of behavior, like gluttony or lust or war. Yeah. Or all these things, right? And the difference between, or I guess some people talk about this sort of movement throughout history towards monotheism, where it's like previously you understand all these things as separate. I don't know if the narrative of moving forward in history towards monotheism is a good one, but anyways, but yeah, I think the difference between like a demonic entity and sort of an angelic entity is just whether or not it's submitted to the greater good, or if it's sort of obsessed with itself. Because like the demon of lust is lust for lust's sake, but the sort of the angel of lust, if that's a thing, is lust for the sake of the ultimate, the creation of God's meta pattern or whatever, right?
It's some kind of like being drawn to like the beauty of the majesty of the pattern or of the higher things.
Well, I remember
or whatever.
recently Angie and I listened to C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves, and he was talking about the different, I guess, the different loves, the different Greek words for love used in the Bible specifically. But he talks about like brotherly love, or like romantic love, like maternal and paternal love, all these different things. And one of the greatest points, though, I think that he makes in that book is he keeps on saying things like, the point where any love is closest to closest to being divine is when it's at most risk of becoming a devil. In that, like when it's acting out it's sort of in its most glorious state or most incredible, most like elative state. It's like that's when it's going to tempt you to kind of want it for its own sake, and you're going to kind of confuse it for the highest good.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly kind of what I was getting at with the pattern that thinks it is the meta pattern in a way. It's like it's and so you can find yourself serving less productive patterns or whatever, or little g gods or demons, and it's these patterns that kind of just, I mean, in the end, they will be subject to the meta pattern. I mean, there's no stopping that in my mind when I think about it this way.
Well, I mean, that's
until that point, you will be in a personal hell or some kind of psychosis or some kind of, because you will be enslaved by this principality, or however you ever want to, I guess principality maybe is a higher up level of this, but
sure.
At least that's the weird way. And like I said, I'm a dummy, and I don't say that like to just put myself down, but I mean it in the sense of like, the more I read, the more I realize I don't know. And so I hold things, like I said, loosely, and I love just thinking about the weird out there kind of stuff and trying to kind of wrangle it. And
well, I don't think that's that out there though. Like I was just,
me, it's like the Oracle at Delphi or Delphi or whatever, like evidently this person would just like spout out a bunch of nonsense and like kind of weird juxtapositions. And there was like a priest that would take all that stuff and then like give a pointed answer to whatever the question was. It's like, I kind of feel that weird way where odd things come around, and I sometimes have a hard time bringing it together. But then thankfully I have friends like you and some other people that can kind of be like, oh, maybe that can attach to this, or yeah, you can maybe kind of stick that here.
I feel like you are one of the most like intuitive thinkers that I know. Like you can grasp really, really big ideas and start to pull them in. But like the bigger that net you throw out to catch a whole bunch of ideas, the harder it is to reel it in into something, and actually bring home a catch. Yeah.
It's like fishing. If like you catch a couple fish, you can pull it into the boat easy. But if you get too many fish, they'll pull you down.
I think that's the
water.
problem, is that you're catching way, way too many fish. You just need somebody to help you wrangle them in.
I need a smaller net, man.
No, man. I like your big brain net.
No, it's not a big brain, man. There's a lot of space up there. That's what it really is. I can catch a lot of ideas.
I was watching a couple different, I thought like, okay, if we're going to try to figure out and think about evil a little bit, I want to like look up some, I watched like a bunch of little 5-minute summaries of different like classic romantic works about evil, like the Inferno, Machiavelli's, let's see, Machiavelli's The Prince, I think, and then Goethe's Faust, I think that's, or no, that's Mephistopheles. Okay, those are the three I was trying to remember, and my little 15 minutes of education paid off. I remembered all three. So
there you go.
But the thing I kind of noticed, I mean, all three of those works, the points they kind of end up coming home with are pretty much exactly spot on what you just said. It's just, becoming obsessed with any particular way of being for its own sake rather than its connection to a kind of a larger pattern. Which, I mean, that's Goethe's, his, like, I think Faust is like a huge long story. I mean, I want to try and watch the movie or I mean, apparently the play is like 16 hours long. So and apparently he never even saw the whole thing himself. So I doubt if he didn't even watch it, if he wasn't patient enough to watch his own freaking play, I don't think I'm going to watch the whole thing. I don't know.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, I never heard of that. I'll buy us tickets, man.
Yeah.
We'll go see it. We'll find a place or some kind of like weird Serbian place that's still running it.
I don't know. The only thing I've heard about like anybody coming close to something that of that length that's actually being performed is like Max Richter's Sleep thing. Have you heard about that?
No, is it just a dude sleeping?
No, it's this like this whole orchestral movement that's 8 hours long that's written for you to sleep to. And so you buy tickets and you go into this huge gymnasium filled with beds, and there's a live orchestra that plays the whole thing while you're supposed to like kind of half sleep.
That's kind of cool. I might do something like that. That's pretty
nuts.
Neat.
And they do performances like a couple of times a year, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I might have to see if I can do one of those. That would be a weird experience.
That's exactly the kind of... We should do it together, man. Go get tickets out to, I think it's like London or something. But yeah, all these all these like classical works that are trying to talk about evil, actually a couple of the other ones I was thinking about today is like with Dante's Inferno, the final ring of hell, I think there's 9 rings, is like betrayal. That's the sin of that area.
Yeah, like Judas is down there and all that. Yeah.
That, but it's somehow like connected to all these other. I mean, I guess the characters I was thinking about is like people like Cain, like Esau, like all these kind of firstborn sons.
Hey, well, watch it. I'm a firstborn son.
So am I. I was thinking actually just about that pattern of like, being a firstborn, you tend to. Okay, this is maybe just really, I'm just kind of rambling this thought and
go for it,
throwing it out there, but I feel like when you're the firstborn, whether firstborn son or firstborn daughter, whatever, and this is kind of imposing some gender roles, but I tend to think that a lot of dads are a lot more assertive, a lot more dominant when it comes to their principles and their way of being. There's obviously dominant moms out there too, but there's a lot of dominant dads. And so it's like whatever there's a pattern of your family, and there's a reason pattern and paternal are, it's like it oftentimes has to do with your father's way of doing things, but maybe whatever. Trying to be too sensitive here, but I notice specifically in my own family, it's like my dad is a really, really assertive, really, it's his way or the highway. And he's like, that can be a really great quality, and it can also get you in a lot of trouble. And I've seen it do both for him. And it's like, I've also noticed that being the firstborn son, for some reason, I identify with my dad, I think a little bit more than my little brother. I think there's a sense of like, there's this archetypal idea of like the blind father, right? Right, where there's some evil. I guess I was thinking about how like in the Egyptian myth of like Horus and all that, and he has to fight Sep, or Set, I'm not sure. He loses his eye when he's fighting Set. And same thing with Odin. He loses his eye when he's like trying to gain the knowledge in order to like he's basically, like a lot of these guys have to sacrifice an eye. They basically become more blind in order to do something really important in order to save their people or overcome some evil, right? So I think, it's like that idea of like you have to be blind to so much and have a singular focus on other things. Exactly. Anytime you focus on something, anytime you specialize in something, you become blind to everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so in some sense, if you look at that on like a familial level, like if your family has to respond to some disaster and some evil or some obstacle, your family pattern has to like become something specific, and it becomes blind to everything else, right? And I think that's like part of, looking at it from like an evolutionary perspective, it's like it's part of the reason that we have like a lifespan and that we reproduce is because you kind of tend to commit to a particular way of being, and then eventually that way of being it's evolved for a certain situation that maybe isn't around anymore, and now you're just still acting out that action sort of in well, I guess where it's not called for, maybe just for the sake of being it, or because it's your identity. And so you have to die eventually. And I mean, that's true on sort of the archetypal levels, like the blind father has to die so that way, his kingdom could be revived by a son who can see things better. But I guess I was just noticing in all these situations where there's two sons, the first son does what his father does more so, and the second son is kind of more open and more like he kind of can learn from a distance. He doesn't identify with his father's pattern of being so much. And usually the first son tends to get screwed over. He tends to, like Cain, he kind of goes in the way of Adam and is a worker of the ground, right? And Abel is the second-born son, I'm pretty sure. And
I think so.
He's doing something else. He's in a new frontier. He still appreciates and understands the family tradition, but he's a little bit less identified with it because, like, the firstborn son's the one who has to act like his father. And Cain's sacrifice isn't acceptable to God, and it pisses him off. It's like, this worked for my dad. How come you're not happy with it anymore, God?
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't get it, and then he ends up getting really mad and wanting to mess up his other brother. Looking at Jacob and Esau, it's like, I don't know, maybe this is like, I'm really just kind of pulling a whole bunch of stuff together and see if it fits. But like with Jacob and Esau, it's the same kind of thing. I think I'm not sure about as far as like occupation. If Esau is more like it, I think so. I think it says like he's a hunter and his dad's a hunter. Yeah. And like Jacob is more like a mama's boy. He's more like he kind of understands his dad's way of life, but he's like, he can see the bigger picture as well. Right. And so it's always the one who's like more identified with the father that ends up getting screwed over and having his inheritance kind of handed down to the other one. And they can get really pissed off at life and like ending up, I guess, well, it's like he falls into the temptation to just be, I guess, look for his father's approval, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of sinking into this greater idea of like, lying is the sin. Is like your parents or in those situations, these guys feel sort of betrayed by their parents. They feel betrayed by the way that was handed down to them, and life doesn't. It's like they were given this pattern of being to try and meet life with, and it didn't work out. And suddenly life says, no, that's not good enough. And so it's like that's like the betrayal at the bottom of the 9 rings of hell. It's like suddenly your understanding of how everything was going to go, the pattern you were handed, suddenly that breaks down and you just become, well, I mean, Cain's response is to just become murderous and start just destroying everything. I mean, just kills his brother, right? He wants to just destroy things because he's mad at being itself.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I'm not going to directly follow up with that, but I see like that what you're talking about is like, there's like, I am more like my dad than my younger brother as well. And so you have this, this thing of like, we are so close together, and it's almost like we butt heads a lot, even though we're very similar. But then as we go down, my younger brother is less so. And I mean, well, my dad and him, they butt heads a little bit too, but he's less like my dad. And that even kind of goes to that the principle of the pattern kind of denigrating over time. But see, what happens is as the pattern kind of goes down, I see it widening, and so it's like it takes more to encompass all the variables in a way. So that's almost what that principle is like of, okay, so Esau was not able to, he was just very specific and single focused, more so like his father, he was a good hunter and all this kind of stuff. But, like you said, Jacob maybe had more of the maternal side of seeing the bigger game.
Right.
And then, I mean, it's kind of sketchy, but he and his mother lied to get the blessing. And then he straight up skedaddled. But then you get Jacob's ladder whenever, he's laying down, and then all of a sudden he wakes up and sees the angels descending and ascending. And he's like, Lord, if you give me providence and you protect me on my journey, like, he's pretty much praying to the God of his father and saying, I will make you my God as well. And then later on, I'm pretty sure when Jacob's older, he's the one that wrestles with God.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah. And becomes Israel. right? Which Israel means one who wrestles with God.
Yeah. And so it's like very odd that it's like, and that's what I see is the pattern. It's like the one becomes the many, but then in the end it's encompassed back into the one.
Right.
That oneness is brought back. It's closed, right. I don't know really what that has to do with this, but I mean,
it's like even that idea of one becoming many and then being brought back in again. That's like Abraham, that's a really common.
Isaac, Jacob, Israel.
Sure.
Israel becomes a huge thing, and
then becomes back into Christ. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also there's like the idea of like, okay, Israel in Egypt. Israel goes into the water, into the Red Sea, and then Israel goes into the Promised Land, right? And water is associated with this breaking down and stopping being one entity and chaos, right?
Yeah.
Being unbuilt and then being built back into something again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many, like you could think of manyness is this sort of the same thing as being as like chaos. Or I looked up the Hebrew because I was thinking of naming one of the songs on my new album after the words in Genesis 1, but tohu bohu, that's formless and void, right? It's like that's
tohu bohu.
Broken down into tohu bohu, right? And then made into something again.
Yeah.
So it's like the breaking down is important because I was thinking about, and I was even talking with my dad a couple weeks ago about the idea of, if is evil just like, because the word diabolical, the word diablo, that means like
Diablo.
The breaking apart of everything, right?
Yeah.
Or it has to do with separating things. But it's like it is important to break things down, but with the end result of bringing them back together.
Yeah, and see, and that goes into the kind of my thinking of this pattern is like the Diablo is a subservient pattern, but if left rogue, it will try to break everything down. But even in trying to break everything down, it's just creating. It's like the Hydra. It's like it just creates more heads, and it will never be able to break everything down. And of course, we see that can be made manifest or embodied in people that, just want to break down the patterns of the world or be anarchists or do certain things like that. But the truth is in the end, even the Diablo serves the ultimate purpose of the meta pattern is that as it breaks things down, it becomes the many, which is like, say, Israel, and then all of a sudden through Israel, the completion of the pattern is made whole.
In the old story about Job, right? The Satan, he's part of the divine council. He's not like this character that's totally separate from God's power and that just like is his enemy. He's like part of the council, part of God's judgment and how he like, whatever, he's part of God's plan. Or even I was also thinking about the angel of death, right? It's an angel of death. It's not a demon of death. We think of the Grim Reaper as this like evil skeleton that's totally like, it's like one of the prime generals of Satan's army, but
really it's a good skeleton. That's the prime general of the angelic army.
Well, I mean, it's like for some reason the ancient Israel had their conception about death and the one who brings it that was associated with God and his plan. But then somewhere along the line, we got this idea that death is just something that is brought about by Satan.
The fall, and therefore it's evil because it was brought about by Satan.
Right.
But even in that, it's like, so even if you believe along that line, and this may sound, and I don't consider myself a Calvinist, but it kind of seems that way. It's like, even in that, like Satan serves the purposes of God's ultimate redemption plan, by bringing about the death or the fall of Adam and Eve and everything like that. It reminds me of the Silmarillion, whenever
I was literally going to bring that up.
Is it Iluvatar? He's the
one who makes it everything, and then Melkor.
Then, they're all the Valar and everything or whatever they're singing forth, and then Melkor is like singing dissonant, but then he stands up and then like belts out a harmony that's sick as crap, and then and then he's like, "You're not gonna mess up my sick jazz solo with this."
He's like, "Hey,
mess.
Bro, it's jazz. Anything goes. Sorry, I know you're trying to screw it up, but it's all right."
That's actually a good way to look at it. It's like it is like jazz. It's like whatever you try to do to destroy it, it just makes the pattern stronger because all of it is part of.
And when I love that relationship of music too, and bringing that into the picture too, because it's so much the case that like music that just like hangs out on a like pretty major chord for a long time is very, it can be kind of peaceful, but it's also very boring if you just let it stay there. The most, like the music that's really dramatic and that pulls you into it is the stuff that's like, that's dynamic, that's like
ups and downs and takes you on a journey.
And specifically dissonance and resolution, right? There's this awesome, I forget even who this is, but there's this great piano song that it was on one of the playlists I was listening to a while ago, and I repeated it a lot of times, so I started to realize probably not. It was some modern pianist.
Is it the piano song Beethoven?
Yeah, by Mozart.
Beethoven by Chopin, bro.
But no, it's like it spends basically like a minute and a half just on this really like minor chord, and then it's like you spend like so long there. And it's so cool when you do that, because especially if you wait so long before resolving something, when it finally changes, you feel that chord progression so much. It's like incredible. Like it's so emotional when it happens. Like
no, I see that. It's the same thing as like in heavier music, like the breakdown. It's like if you have a good build up and like you have this progression, and all of a sudden it breaks down, like you feel it. But if everything's just a breakdown, I think that goes back to the principle you were saying, is like anything for the sake of itself or in too much is bad.
Right.
And that's kind of what Paul was saying. Is like everything in moderation, like beauty in moderation is a good thing. Or, like, I don't mean lust in the negative connotation, but that draw to beauty or, to even its end in like, a sexual relationship with another person or whatever it is, like that is good in of itself, but it can be bad if you just do that all the time.
Anything for the sake of itself, which kind of, I think, filters into the idea. This is the thing, is that I think when you start talking about sin, you can kind of narrow it down, or if you're a good enough storyteller, you can take almost any sin you want to and make everything kind of be a form of that sin. Because I heard like a preacher talk about how like every one of the 10 Commandments is just a version of stealing. Or I mean, one of the ways I thought about everything before as being a version of pride or being a version of idolatry. It's like, I mean, especially the idolatry one is pretty easy. It's just anything for the sake of itself. It's like, there's a couple levels of it, because partially it's just putting something on a pedestal and worshiping it like higher than it should be worshipped. I mean, I like to focus on there's the 10 Commandments that says you should not have any gods before me, right? Which it presumes you're going to have other gods, but none of them should come before Yahweh. Right. Yeah. It's like it's fine if you want to worship other things, but don't worship them above me. Make sure you worship them in their correct place in the hierarchy, because worship from that perspective is just giving something worth, or saying that something is worth something, or doing something to kind of communicate that through, I don't know, whatever song or laying down sacrificing a child on the altar. I mean, that's chill. Not a big deal.
I just did that last Friday. No,
but no, like it's like you're gonna worship things. You should be able to say that things are valuable because they are. It's just that you don't want to put them kind of out of place.
Yeah.
But this is like that could all be so. Okay, so that's one side of idolatry. But another way of thinking about idolatry is that, or like making a graven image, because that's a separate command, I think, even too, where it's just the idea of when I think about it in terms of like putting a pattern in stone. It's like codifying things too much and saying, hey, things aren't going to change from here.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because like literally the 10 Commandments are written on stone. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd thing. I never thought of it like that. I'll probably have to think about that for a minute to try to pull some kind of weird shenanigans out of it.
I mean, to some extent, it kind of, the story answers it, because that quandary, because it eventually, Christ has to come and fulfill the law and say, if you try and live things by a code, it doesn't actually work. It was just to kind of show you that that you're not perfect. You can't even live up to a code, even if you wrote it down.
Yeah. Well, I think it also is where it's like, it's part of that hyper focus again. It's like there's so much in that code that is not explicitly stated, and then so you end up revising and revising and revising to the point where it's like, then you get that facsimile problem, like where like 80 iterations down, it's like the telephone game. You have something completely else than what you were supposed to have. And that goes back to that pattern kind of denigrating. We experience that all throughout life and existence, whenever I mean, our cells, after they copy so much, the telomeres shrink, it starts eating into the cell becomes damaged, then we start getting copied damaged cells, and then eventually that's what starts aging process, and then we break down and we die.
I love that.
And it's literally in every, and that's what I mean by, like, you know, in my head, as weird as it sounds, like God is that all-consuming pattern, you know, like everything is within that. And even the like, hopefully I'm using this word right, the abhorrent or like aberrant patterns, you know, they serve him even in their aberration. They serve.
So what are you meaning by that word? Like, because I when I hear the word abhorrent, it's like something to abhor. It's like something that you dislike or something that's evil. Or I mean, I guess that's what you mean, right?
So yeah. Like, I mean it as like something that may not be wanted, like in the copying of this pattern, but I think maybe aberrant is probably the better word, because it's just like, it's an aberration. You know, this part of the pattern is an aberration, but even that aberration ultimately serves the purposes of the overall pattern, you know, of this stasis and novelty manifestation. Because think about it this way: so it's, you have stasis and novelty, and then it manifests, and then that manifestation is just more little microcosms of stasis and novelty. So then you have something like Diablo is like built into that, like the breaking down of these things that stack up. But then even as those things break down, it's more just stasis and novelty and manifestation.
I think...
and my daughter, she's coming in the room.
She want to have a quick cameo?
You want a cameo? She just woke up from a nap.
Aww.
It's too late to have a nap. Look at her. You want to say hello? Say hello.
No.
Do you believe do you believe in evil? Yeah. She says, yeah, my mommy's pretty evil from time to time. No, I'm just kidding. Let me get Christy. Can you come get the baby, please? Sorry. All right. Give me 1 second. Will you lock this door, Christy, in here from the inside? Sorry. Anyways,
hey, as far as I know, like cute kids on YouTube and now
they're going to disable your comment section, Garrett. Gosh,
crap!
Because all the people that are going to try to, you know, be weird about a kid, well, no, I'm not going to say that's just gonna be weird. But anyways, yeah. So even these aberrations, like they actually serve in that process, you know, of, so there's manifestation, but then in that manifestation, there is a breakdown, you know. So you say that, you know, Satan is the highest angel or the most beautiful angel. So you could see how after manifestation,
right,
which is like Jesus.
I never thought about that before.
You would have like this Lucifer principle, but that Diablo, like he thinks he is the pattern, and therefore whatever, you know, and then so it breaks down, and then it continues to.
Well, see, I think the key with the diabolical principle is that it's not just breaking things down. It's not just, you know.
I had my mic backwards when I picked it back up. Anyways, the breakdown.
Okay, yeah. The Diablo thing, I think it's not just about breaking things down, because obviously that's part of what's necessary in order for rebirth, right? That's built into all the patterns of kind of going back to a state of chaos, of void, or whatever, right? But I think the diabolical idea pattern is to break down and separate and isolate, right? Mm. It's not just breaking things down so they can be made into something new. It's breaking things down for the sake of breaking things down.
Yeah, but that reminds me of like, okay, so you can separate out like the one into many, but then in the like those many, and even so then you have the many, but then the many is made up by individuals. So then they're separated in that sense, but then even those individuals will create many. Like, so it's like, even as it's tried to be pulled down and apart, it just continues that pattern, because as soon as you have this, anything that can be considered like this stasis and novelty manifestation, it's going to keep on replicating that pattern down. So like even in like man, woman, and child, you know, and then the child is either a male or female, and I don't want us to get canceled, but you know, and then but that child will potentially repeat that pattern of, if it's a girl, she'll get married and they'll have children, and it will keep going. So, and it was, this is maybe kind of going back, and you can stop me if you need to, but I was actually talking about this idea of like the pattern being like denigrated as it's passed down. And I was thinking about it as far as like Adam and Eve. So you have like God give a pattern of being like within the garden, like, and say that pattern is like, you can eat from all these fruits, but not this one. And it looks like something like that maybe, or, the knowledge of good and evil. So if you take it from that example, you can go, okay, so God said, here's a pattern of existence, but don't get into the knowledge of good and evil, like follow the pattern I've laid out for you. And what's interesting to me is that Eve is the one that first takes the fruit, or first imbibes in the knowledge of good and evil. And if you think about Eve, she is not a direct link to the pattern. So like you have God raising matter, breathing spirit into Adam, and then Eve is brought out of Adam's side. Yeah. So right there, you already have a denigration. Like she wasn't made from the same pattern or stuff that he was. So then when the serpent comes,
that totally lines. Okay, I'll come back to this in a second, so I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, it's fine. So when the serpent comes, like you can say the serpent is a literal talking, I don't care. Or you can say the serpent represents change. So when change comes in the garden, and then Eve goes, well, I'm going to do this about it, or I'm going to go about this course of action. And then it goes to Adam, hey, we should do this. She frames, you get what I'm saying? Like she frames a course of action, but it's not their place, because now they're deviating from the pattern, the prime pattern or the meta pattern. And then they're thrust out of the garden. The balance of stability and wilderness is
I want to see if this little firstborn, second-born thing kind of chimes in there, because
I've got some stuff about that in regards to this too.
Because, well, I mean, okay, there's Lilith. Is that where you're thinking of going?
Exactly.
Okay,
man.
but before we do that, look at real quick. There's if you think about Adam and Eve are the firstborn sort of children of God.
Yeah.
Adam is the one who identifies more strictly with God's pattern that he leaves him with, and Eve is the one who's a little bit more generalized. And it's always the first one that gets screwed over, and the second one that kind of like deceives them, or like that kind of wins by. So I mean, looking at Jacob and Esau, anyways, is like Esau is just doing things the way his dad taught him, and he gets totally screwed over, right? By his more general, more big picture seeing brother, who's the second born. And it's like that's Eve is the one who's aware and who sees the bigger picture and takes the knowledge of good and evil first, and then screws over her brother, or screws over, not her. Wait, this is a weird relationship.
Her brother husband. Wait, I didn't know the Garden of Eden was in Alabama.
No, it's
I love you, Alabama. Roll Tide, not really.
But yeah, I think it's that pattern that kind of makes sense too.
Yeah, but going to Lilith,
Lilith.
There's some interesting stuff. Okay, so I've been thinking about Lilith a lot since we talked.
So Lilith,
literally,
first off, she's not in. Whose text is she in? Like, where does she come from?
Ancient, like kind of ancient-ish Judaistic or Judaism.
So like she's going to show up in the Talmud?
Yeah. I don't know about the Talmud. Like I think later than that, and but she comes up in some of their kind of more out there like mythology.
Okay.
But anyways, before even Lilith, so you have this thing of like God creates the heavens and the earth, and then there's like the dark waters. In my mind, that represents like the dark mother. Like it's chaotic. It's the bad parts of like creativity or whatever, the chaos. And then God brings forth the earth, which is like the good mother that is able to host life.
Okay.
And so then, of course, you have the garden. And at first, he creates Adam out of the dust. And then that's what's interesting about the story of Lilith is he also makes Lilith after Adam out of the dust, the same way he made Adam. But Lilith does not want to be subservient to Adam. And that goes into that whole thing about not wanting to serve the pattern. Because, see, they're both directly under the meta pattern in this instance. And so she's saying, no, I will not do what the meta pattern is saying, and I will not serve under, Adam. So she goes out, and in the mythology, she actually births children with Samael, which is like a satanic angel kind of figure and births the monsters and the demons and all this stuff into the world.
Right. Interesting.
And so those are the first children. Listen here, Garrett. Those are the first children that are rejected. They're the ones that are rejected by God, and then humanity is accepted. Humanity is like the second-born, and then this kind of makes sense evolutionarily as you think like, so Lilith, our first kind of uprising through some kind of evolutionary thing, is we were like monsters. We were like weird fish things, and we were like lizard things, and we were like we were shrew things and ape things, and then all of a sudden we're human things. It's like, so you can see this like transition from like the Lilith's children to like Eve's children. We were kind of reborn in that sense, even in that sense. And of course, you can layer on all the weird fall stuff on top of that. But yeah, man, I love that. Is like, you see like this dark mother, and even in like, Greek literature, like you have the Oedipal mother and the overbearing, smothering mother. You have like the female spider creates a web to trap her prey and then eats her husband. And then like, if her children don't get away, she'll eat them too. Like, so like this is Lilith, like this all is Lilith to me, it's that dark mother. And even in Jungian archetypes, the dark mother is like a huge role. And that's that balance that you have to, like, it's kind of,
Lilith is the one that wants to pull everything into herself rather than submitting to a higher pattern. And it's not that specifically that she has to submit to, like, were you saying that she has to submit to Adam, or she has to submit to God's pattern?
To God's pattern, but I believe, this is old school, traditional kind of, but in God's pattern that, Adam would be the head, so
right.
If she doesn't want to be subservient to him, by virtue of that, she's not submitting to the meta pattern. And so she casts herself out. And then in that way,
right.
And even in that, she gives birth to demons. So now think about the implications of that. So you have so Lilith is the smothering mother. And then you could say, I'm trying to think of a good tyrannical father figure. You can, I'm trying to, I don't know. I can't, I'm spitballing. I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but anyway, so you have like
tyrannical father or like blind father,
tyrannical or blind father, like a father that his single focus ends up, Kronos. Perfect. You have Kronos, who literally devours his children because he killed his parents. So he goes, I had all these little squirts, and
now they're going to kill me.
They're going to kill me. So I'm going to eat them before they can kill me.
Okay.
So like the tyrannical, cannibalistic father, and so you have like a father that's tyrannical or consumes his family, and a mother that either smothers or consumes her family.
Right.
And then you have this, dadgummit, I kind of lost my my train of thought. I was going to tie this into to something.
Well, is it just like the idea of if you're an entity that wants to pull everything into yourself, or you're taking part in a pattern that wants to pull everything into itself, then you're committing sin, basically. It's like if you're being the thing that if you're trying to pull everything into you, and just that you're being sort of you're being that tyrannical father, or you're being that devouring mother, you're being that character that wants to just pull the universe into itself. And the trouble
that's inherently wrong for the pattern, because the pattern is supposed to continue down. It's supposed to keep integrating itself. So whenever you gather to yourself or you try to consume for yourself, you're like it's like a tumor. Like you begin to create an issue.
Well, I think the key there with the tumor thing is you brought up telomeres earlier, which those are like the basically the timers on a cell to tell it when it's time to die, or how many times it should reproduce itself when it gets into trouble. The key is just knowing when your time is to die, because it's not that you shouldn't pull anything into yourself, and you shouldn't make yourself bigger. You shouldn't sort of expand. You shouldn't reproduce yourself. It's just knowing, following that, because the difference between a cancerous cell and one that isn't cancerous is whether or not the telomere is broken, or it somehow gotten way too long, or just mixed up, and suddenly now it's just way overproducing itself. It gets this virus, or gets this idea in its head, so to speak, that it needs to start reproducing a whole bunch. And if the telomere is too long, or it stops being able to, I'm not sure how the telomere thing works. If is it splitting into half each time?
I think that the tumors just over time they just keep reducing on the ends of the cells.
Okay.
But anyways, it reproduces, and then it starts to eat into the actual cell, and then that degrades.
But so it's like cancer, and I think people even use cancer as sort of a character in like a psychological character or a mythical character sometimes. Or isn't cancer a crab? I don't know why it's a crab, but for some reason, cancer is the thing that pulls everything into itself. I'm interested as to why it's a crab, though. It'd be interesting to understand why they named that sickness or that class of sicknesses after crabs.
Sorry, my daughter is trying to trick my wife into getting into the room so she can make a guest appearance. She's going for the royalties, Garrett. That's what it is. We're gonna file Screen Actors Guild paperwork right after this, so she can be unionized. And now I got the dog in here. Sorry, this is all entertainment, right?
I'm entertained.
No. Yeah, I completely. Yeah, I can see that. But in my mind, the cancer is like, I don't know if it has more to do with the telomeres or like there's a malfunction in the reproduction part of the cell that says I need to reproduce myself, and then it just continues to reproduce itself, and then that becomes, the fleshy tissue that is a tumor, right? And that can be like the mother who's just like, no, I need to keep reproducing myself, or I don't know how that. Well, I mean, it works, but it's kind of a weirder analogy when you think about it that way. But instead of her like stepping out of the way, it's like she continues to try to reproduce herself and her children. I guess you could say like she wants them to be like her, and that and so she's domineering, whether it's a male or a female, right. Or and so you have, and then that's where I was going to go earlier. I forgot. Okay. So it's coming back around now. So then what happens is if you have the Tyrannical Father or this Lilith like mother, you literally birth demons. Like, so think about if you are a bad mother or father, you create children that actually have this scattered persona, like where they have to develop they have to kind of worship these other principalities, or they have to be able to be angry at a moment's notice so that they can protect themselves against a tyrannical, mean father, or the mother is so smothering they recluse and they become so introverted and depressed, or whatever it may be, over like and so you can see how these bad, like a bad parent can lead to demons or monsters, and you can see it in just kids, and it's not to say that the kids can't be better or anything like that, but I just found that it was interesting because you can draw a line straight.
I think there's a strong difference though between sort of the character of the that smothering mother and the tyrannical father, like as far as like archetypes or like symbolic characters anyways, in that like, so the father, the paternal figure has more to do with the pattern, has more to do with enforcing his law, enforcing his way on his children, and like being extremely, extremely overbearing, like with his like heavy-handed, heavy-fisted, right? And he's like, you're going to do things my way, and like so much discipline and so much like, it's like you can never measure up, right? And that kind of breaks the kids down. But the Oedipal mother. I always forget how to say that.
Oedipal. Yeah, it's like she marries her son or whatever because the dad is killed.
Her the really practical representation of that is that she's identified so much with compassion and being bigger, and it's like any behavior that her child does, she's unwilling to punish it. She just wants to shower it with love and affection and comfort and just make, and then. When you do that to your child, you eventually you make them into a terrible person. So that way, when they go into the world utterly rejects them, right?
Yeah. And it's the same way with the Tyrannical Father, because you can have broken down kids that then can't operate in the world, or they become Tyrannical Fathers and continue to impose this kind of like where instead of someone maybe seeing a meta, like because the father's so single focused, you have a bunch of children or people that are just single focused instead of being able maybe to see the meta pattern. They only see their father, and so they're always trying to get affirmation from their father or make their father proud, and and they're trying to exhibit that same pattern, and so they have a broken psyche in that sense. So because it's like they're always spinning their wheels and they get burned out, and then they become depressed or whatever, or they have this kind of false sense of machismo or whatever, and they to impress their father, but it's like never enough, because the tyrannical father is
more,
he is
better.
the pattern.
Yeah,
he's the pattern. You have to be like me, boy, or whatever. And with the mother, it's very interesting, like you're saying. It's very hard with the mother, I think, because I think with the father, like a good father, of course, and self-sacrifice, I think, has to do with all this stuff. It's all in this. So a good father is willing to like sacrifice at certain key points, to recognize that his son is his own man, I guess you could say, or what, there's certain moments where it's like, I see this pattern of like a good father imposing pattern, but it's for the sake of the family. It's not for his own sake.
When also like knowing the right threshold of how
provide,
much to enforce that pattern, how much, and when to kind of say, hey, you're doing good enough.
Yeah. And to toil and to do the work to understand, like, hey, listen, here's the pattern. Hey, you fell short. That's okay. Because guess what? That's part of the pattern. We all make mistakes. Let's try to get back up and keep going, and then of course, the good father sacrificing himself to show a good side of the pattern. But then there's also the balance of still being there for the family and not only sacrifice. Because like we said, anything without moderation ends up being poor. But then you have the mother, where she sacrifices her body and her time and all this stuff. And so there's so much self-sacrifice up front with the child. And then she sacrifices even more of her mental strength and emotional strength, like being maternal over these children. But then there comes a time, and this kind of translates like Mary, where she kind of has to sacrifice her children to the world. It's like you have to let go. It's like the bird that's pushed from the nest too early will fall to its death, but the bird that's just kept in the nest will never learn how to like hunt for itself, will never learn how to be a bird, will never mate and reproduce the pattern. So, and what's interesting is you can see a lot of this like in today's culture, like this kind of, and I think it's, if you kind of look back a generation or two, you had these super like somewhat tyrannical father figures. And then you end up having this kind of rejection altogether of that. And then you swing to the other side where it's like too loose. Right. And now you're starting to see that it's like now there's a complete rejection of any type of pattern. And we're, breaking down the patriarchy or the pattern of reality.
Right.
And I don't mean to say that the patriarchy that feminists, proclaim they're trying to tear down is the one that I'm talking about. I understand that there are, I would say that maybe the patriarchy, some of them conflate it, but I would say like the tyrannical father part of it, yes, that kind of pattern does need to be torn down, but you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
At least my wife says I can't. She won't fit down the drain. Not anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Lord. Sorry. I don't know. I got to keep it PG, right? Was that PG-13?
It's all right. We can go PG-13 on this show. Wow.
Help us.
Okay. Yeah. So there's the idea, of just the dying thing. It's like the father is the one who struggles to die.
Yeah.
And it's like
think about Moses.
Yeah. I wonder if that's why
enter the promised land.
I mean, there's probably historical reasons for why Christ is a man, but like specifically, it's like I think men are the ones who will find it harder to die, and so it's like Jesus needed to say, "Hey, look, I'm a man." Like maybe part of why that character had to be a man is to show men how to die, because women were already so good at it. I mean, in the sense of like,
girl, I love the way you die.
But I mean, like in the sense that like, if temperamentally you're more likely to be somebody who's willing to be compassionate, to be empathetic, to be open to new ideas, your struggle isn't so much to learn how to die; it's to learn how to be brave and to stand up for yourself. If your kind of temperamental intuition or just kind of where you will naturally go, kind of based on your evolution, based on your society's teaching, and like just men will tend to be more that paternal force, right? That pattern, right? That they focus on a particular way and do it and be something. And it's like, that's the sort of person that needs to learn how to die and when the right time to die is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to that, like, that's silly. I think it's like some kind of, isn't it a Batman quote that says, if you live long enough, you see yourself turn into the villain. And I think that it's almost true. Like, so you have a type of man that is born to a certain time. Like, think of, who is it? The crazy World War II guy, or Churchill or whatever. Like, he was like, he was so strategically minded. He was like alpha male, and he helped the Allied forces advance. But that type of man today would be like, I mean, literally, I mean, think about, I mean, people would call that type of man Hitler these days.
Right.
And maybe rightfully so. I don't know.
Right.
I've not thought about it that deeply, but
well, it's because
there's a place and time for that type of man.
Yeah.
And then his time is done. But then what we do is we romanticize what he was and did. And we kind of say, he was an incredible strategic thinker. He helped the Allied force. And then he becomes glorified even in his death. And then, of course, through his lineage or through other people that, try to emulate his way of thinking or strategizing or whatever it may be, he kind of lives on in that way, just like, everyone would, or, any man, I guess, who dies or whatever, can, in a way.
Yeah.
Through an extended body.
Right. Or his children become as many as the stars because.
Yeah. They will be the ones to lead us out of the meme wars of 2032. I'm calling it. I
had that same thought as far as just once. Well, if you evolve to meet a certain, I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier. So like your family or your father, or just like even metaphorically speaking, just as a character, the pattern evolves to meet a certain situation, and then you overcome that problem. But now you've already established that pattern as that was sort of a responsive pattern to that situation, and now it needs to die. And it's just knowing when the right time to let go of that way of being is.
Yeah, think about the sperm. It goes into the egg and is assimilated. And it's like you think about the seed going into the earth, it dies, and then it dies, but it transforms into a new kind of type of life. It's not the same thing. I think that's the same thing of like, being like the paternal side is like you're saying, like you have this strong codified way, like, and that's what Moses represented, this like, the law and this and everything else. And then as he goes into the promised land, he wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. Because he was he struck the rock.
That's interesting too.
He wasn't allowed, and then all the people that didn't believe they could claim the promised land, which were a lot of the older generation, from what I understand, reading the scripture, I could be completely wrong, they were not allowed to enter into the promised land. It was Joshua, these younger strapping men who were like, we can take the giants, we can claim the promised land. It was the people that saw the future and believed that God could bring them into there when others maybe had doubts. And then, of course, even so, I mean, you think about from Moses, then you have Joshua, but then Joshua, I think, is surrounded by a couple of cats, like, his merry men in a way. And that goes from the one to the many in a way.
I love that.
And then, so then you even go from there. And then, I mean, the whole, the shebang with all the tabernacle and desert wandering and promised land shenanigans. I haven't read that stuff.
Dude, it's been a while. Yeah. I honestly, I felt like, after doing fire, doing Bible school, and it was just like, I think it was, so here's the thing I was thinking about before, as far as like the firstborn thing, is like, I think noticing the trajectory that my life and even my older sister's lives have had, as far as trying to deal with our understanding of religion and kind of what was passed down to us by our parents, both of us had a much more serious and dramatic sort of dark night of the soul experience than any of our, like our younger counterparts. Like my older sister Caitlin is kind of the younger, the second-born daughter, and Evan's sort of the second-born son. It's like Deanna and I both had these experiences of like becoming totally almost defeated when we realized that, that what we'd been handed didn't cover everything. Like we both had a real like deep depression experience, and it was like trying to find a way out of that was really hard, because I think we were that much more committed to the pattern that we'd been handed down.
Yeah.
But it's like our younger siblings got to kind of watch
Yeah.
and say, no, I don't want to do that. But it's like, yeah. So, but that's the like the I don't know. I just really relating to that Cain scenario. It's like when he got to that point where, you know, the pattern he'd been given wasn't enough and God didn't accept his sacrifice, he got so frustrated at reality that he just wanted to destroy everything. It's like that's the, I don't know. It's
malevolence.
Yeah, it's like there's something beyond just not giving yourself up, not being willing to die. It's that being sort of pissed off at reality not giving you, or like when you made the sacrifice and you did what you honestly thought was right. It's like, especially like looking at my sister, she like gave everything that she had. She went out and she became a missionary to Asia, and it was like like she did it. She gave it. She did everything that her peers and that my parents wanted her to do. It was like, this is the ideal way to be an evangelical Christian, is to go and to preach the gospel to the world. And she just got, you know, the world walloped her. You know, and that
Hey, yeah, she died. She did everything right and died, just like Christ did. He did everything right and he still died. And we can do everything right or wrong and we'll still die. But no, I'm sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No, I mean, it's like, that was the sense, is that, and that's an interesting comparison, that Christ did everything right and still died. But it's that he accepted his death, right?
Mm-hmm. It was a self-sacrifice. But he said, you know, if this cup can pass for me, you know, let it, but your will be done.
Right.
So then he gave himself to that process. Went down into
Socrates' death was like, you know, when he was kind of condemned to death, he's like, thought, maybe this is the time to die. You know, that I'm not gonna die of old age. I'm not gonna be in pain. I got my IDs out there. I did what I was supposed to do, and maybe it's my time to die.
Well, yeah, and he straight up just ate a bowl of hemlockos, right? Got the milk in the hemlock or whatever it was.
I don't actually know. Yeah, he had some kind of poison.
Yeah, I think so. I think that might have been what it was. Straight munching, bro. went out eating, dude.
I mean, I like eating. I'd be down. Probably not. I'm pretty sure. Probably, if you're eating something that kills you, unless it also knocks you out, it'd probably be pretty rough
painful.
Experience. Pretty painful for a little while.
Oh yeah, man. I would not randomly. My wife and I were watching. This is off course, but we were watching a show, and in the show, these people were poisoned, and I thought it was cyanide poison. So I looked up like what happens, and evidently cyanide like is such a tiny particle, it actually goes into like the smaller parts of you and changes something on the cellular level that makes it to where like the cell's oxygen receptors don't work anymore, and so your organs and everything literally just like start shutting down, and you're still alive for like the whole process. Like, so you literally feel like your heart dying, your lungs are stopping, you can't breathe, and it's just like a horrific death, and it takes like 2 to 5 minutes. But
so it's not the quick death. Well, no, in The Princess Bride, that's some other kind of poison, right? What's he call that?
I'm not sure, actually. I don't remember, but I love that movie. It's hilarious.
He has like an immediate.
But yeah, see, so we integrate the poison slowly, like the dreaded
right. Well, the Dread Pirate Roberts. Yeah. Well, and that's if you can realize that you need to die before it becomes to that moment where it's like, okay, the virus has taken over you completely. You've kind of etched yourself so deeply into this way of being that there's no way out, and you just gotta die. Then, like, if you can catch it before then, you can realize. I'm thinking about that actually. So, depending on the situation, is like sometimes you're going to have to commit so deeply to doing something a certain way in order to meet a certain event, meet a certain problem, that like there's no choice for you. You just do your duty, and then once that's done, you've got basically PTSD. You're like totally screwed up now. There's no way out of being the character you become. It was necessary.
You become like a monster to fight monsters, or you become something that is not like human, or you're still human, but you're so highly specialized.
Right.
You're like, yeah. Whenever you try to go back to some sort of situation of multiplicity or whatever, it's like it's so foreign to you. You can't. There's a disconnect between you and the world.
Well, okay. This is just kind of jumping back to something because I was thinking about. I think I remember there's like some kind of ant or some sort of bug that like as a colony they have like a response like that. Like when under certain environments they have like they send out a certain kind of bug. I can't. It's really vague memory, so I can't really explain what it is. But it just got me thinking about bugs and thinking about biology again. And I was thinking back to the selfish gene, and in that,
yeah, man, that dude is super selfish, bro. I hate Gene.
Dang old
Screw
Gene.
You. If you're listening to Gene, screw you. I'm just kidding. I love you, Gene. You're a brother to me.
Have you read though Richard Dawkins' Selfish Gene book?
Dude, man, why would Richard Dawkins write an entire book about how selfish Gene is, bro? It's like an 800-page book, isn't it?
No, dude. Actually, Selfish Gene is a nice. That's an easy read. It's pretty short.
Oh, so like 799 pages?
Yeah, it's at least it's less than 800 pages. That's for sure.
At most it's 800 pages. At most.
But in that book though, he's talking about how like the difference between a parasitic organism, like a virus, and something that ultimately is like just a sub, like just a cell that lives within a larger, animal. And basically the difference is that the strategy of a virus or a parasite is just more expedient and not long term stable. Like he basically makes the argument that basically all of the cells that exist in your body at one point their ancient ancestors were something not distinguishable from a virus or from a parasite, right? And it's just through making it through the bottleneck of, or realizing that their way, if they were their only way of reproducing themselves was to reproduce with the rest of your body, it was kind of eventually encoded into them that it was in their best interest for the whole organism to survive because that's kind of what houses them, right? Yeah. And so eventually those cells stop being parasitic and they just become just cells that are like they have their own sort of. Right, they're kind of their own genes. That's the word he wants to use. Is that these every sort of individual, every unit has selection pressure being associated with it could be considered as a gene. It's like a small piece of DNA that almost. It's not like it has agency, but it has it. It has something. Maybe Jonathan Peugeot would call it agency because it wants to be reproduced. It's like that's what he wants to call the selfish thing. That's the crux of evolution. It's all about the gene. I think he goes a little bit too far there, but just the difference between a selfish gene or a gene that's well, I mean, basically the argument of the whole book is that a properly selfish gene, and this is sort of the utilitarian argument for virtue and for goodness, is that if it's actually the best strategy for you if you want to sort of replicate yourself and give yourself eternal genetic life anyways, to respect the sanctity of the whole system that houses you, right? If you can live out life in a way that preserves you and gives you joy and well-being and happiness, and also your descendants and everybody around you in such a way that you help to create an environment that will in the future be stable for you to exist in, then you're going to be a lot better off than just being something that consumes everything and sort of basically it's just like uses up its resources quickly and then dies. I mean, that's a sort of a dumb virus, a virus that isn't very smart and that would die out pretty quickly. The difference between a parasite, because I think that's even the case with parasites and viruses and stuff like that, is that they have fairly short lifespans. I think they go extinct fairly quickly unless they mutate into like different versions and they kind of are rapidly trying out new strategies for spreading.
Yeah. That reminds me of the whole kind of thing that good old JP, Jordan Peterson, not Jonathan Peugeot. I guess there's two JPs now. But Jordan Peterson, and I hear you talk about it, and we've talked about it, the whole like, you want to win the right amount of games or whatever, and sometimes you got to lose some battles so that you can kind of win the war or whatever, and that reminds me a lot of that. It's kind of like you got to kind of pick and choose. There are certain hills that you may need to die on, but once you die on them, like, you're dead. So it's like, how do you navigate through this stuff? And interesting enough is like, I don't know this. I'm kind of gonna link through Jordan Peterson back to like some stuff about a little bit about evil. Is like you have
because Jordan Peterson is evil. I mean, that's kind of an easy link. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, he's not.
He's evil incarnate, man.
No, I am. Hey, stop stealing my moves, Jordan Peterson. No, but he talks about like this idea of like the Father, being extrapolated over like iterations or generations of like good men or warrior men, and like all those good attributes become something like the Spirit of the Father. And that's the same way that I view like the spirit of evil. It's like malevolence over time, and like you can pick out the most malevolent actions, on earth, and you kind of can extrapolate that up, and like that becomes kind of like this spirit of evil in a way, or something that tries to break down humanity, or the adversary of humanity in a way. The maybe an antichrist type thing, because if we're supposed to embody the meta pattern as Christ does, whatever this is does the opposite of that. Anyways, that just popped in my head, and I wanted to somehow circle around to it. I know we were talking about viruses, but
but that's good.
To evil.
But yeah, the thing about the evil character is that it's more. My head's blanking a little bit.
It's okay.
Finish up the thought you just said again. Get me back on track here.
Yeah. So you can imagine, like, and even Peterson, he says like the Spirit of the Father is like extrapolation of like these eons of like certain great men that have driven forward progress, or had certain great attributes and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, I moved the mic away from my face. They have good attributes, and so you can codify that almost as like an example, like an Ubermensch, or like something to pursue, like an ideal, and like this is like the Spirit of the Father. Uh-oh, what? But you can also do the same thing for evil. You could take the worst like villains, or like Hitler and all these people, and like go like that. Well, that is like malevolence embodied, and then you could kind of extrapolate that up and kind of come up with this like evil entity that is like this, like the spirit of evil. And then as Jordan says, he said, I believe that comes up somehow, like that is a reflection of some type of meta narrative or reality, the Spirit of the Father. And I would say that spirit of evil is that being that, talking about in the weird hierarchy, it's kind of the breakdown of that overall pattern in a way, that serves itself or tries to break down and isolate. But even in doing so, it's kind of a pointless endeavor, because it will do it because that's what's in its reproduction, or it instantiating itself downwards is what it will keep on trying to do. Just like a virus, it will keep on trying to replicate itself. But eventually it will serve like, and I know a virus can kill a body, but as you were saying, it's like if there's a virus that's too greedy, I guess you could say, like, it will kill itself out. But then you can think about this as like the cosmic body, or however you want to say it, is like ultimately it will flesh out the virus. And the way it does that is by everything that virus tries to do just continues to build the body. It becomes, like you were saying, those viruses become cells in the body. There's no escaping it. They will be assimilated. And that's kind of like, I don't know if it's in Revelation or where it is, it says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. It's like, and it says the principalities are like under his feet. And it's like, to me, that's what that means. Is like, he is the pattern on top of these other lower patterns. And I know I keep coming back to this, but it's just kind of, it's been on my mind recently about it. And then, talking about
can
evil,
you explain? It sounds like when you're talking about like these patterns and sub patterns, and like there's kind of a deconstruction of the main pattern. Is like, I'm getting the sense that you're saying like that the further it gets down the pattern, the more like broken it becomes, or the more like.
This is where I kind of borrow some from Gnosticism. Gnosticism says that there's like the source, like the unknown God. It's completely unknowable. And even me saying about it is I'm kind of talking about a lesser God probably.
Right.
But so you have the source, and then Barbello is like this void or womb that emanations come through, and then you have all these principalities and stuff that are birthed through that, and then eventually you get the demiurge that actually creates this like creation, which they would say, I can't remember the one guy's name. I knew there was like a great arc. I know Abraxas is part of it, but Abraxas is like this weird like chicken-headed lizard or snake-footed entity that's like this weird
snake-footed.
Kind of yeah, dude.
Wait, it has snakes for feet?
Look up Abraxas whenever you get a chance, dude. He's weird. But anyways, Abraxas is like this weird mixture of like the sacred and profane. He's like unknowable, some kind of weird thing. But I don't actually, I'm mixing him up. The demiurge is a lesser being, and that's why the world has fallen to the Gnostics, because he's a lesser emanation, and so that's why the world was able to fall. But then he ruled with like the tyrannical father in the Old Testament, but then Jesus comes as an emissary from Barbello, the womb, and from as like an emissary from the source, the actual like real God, and then he saves humanity or creation through the way of the actual source or whatever, undoing what the demiurge does. And I don't believe necessarily all that,
but the general,
but more like the
trajectory
pattern,
though is that like the more
general trajectory is that the emanation. That's where I'm at. And a lot of Gnostics believe that material is evil inherently. I don't believe that. I believe that it's all emanated down, but as you emanate down, there is a denigration in the emanation that happens. It's like the same thing if you take a copy, like say you take a copy of an original piece of paper, that has text on it, and then you copy the copy, and then you take that off and copy that copy. After 60 or 70 iterations, it's just going to be like blobs. It's going to be like messed up. You're not going to be able to see what the text originally was. I'm trying to understand it because I intuitively that doesn't seem right to me. Like, it doesn't seem to be the case that like that just. The thing is, it's the copies that are happening aren't arbitrary. It's not just somebody putting a piece of paper in a copy machine over and over again. It's there's a maybe
like
a poor
it's an
analogy,
an evolutionary selection that's happening. That like the copies that don't work, the copies that don't communicate the purpose of the piece of paper, they don't get copied again, right?
Well, see, I'm not talking about evolution. I'm talking about the meta structure.
But so why doesn't the evolutionary pattern why isn't it part of that?
Well, it is, but it's at a lower level. So you have different variances in like denigrated pattern. So like in my mind, evolution is like, it even goes back to like the novelty and stasis thing. It's like you have to have enough novelty for a species to like have variant, but if it's too much, it may be too mutated, it dies. But if it stays too stable, it dies. So you have to have both, and then that manifests a new species or something new that can survive in this certain era of time or whatever, dinosaur or shrew or whatever the animal may be. And then that's what's going to go forward and continue to reiterate that pattern. And then, of course, the outside forces also are showing like this whole thing, like, they're seeking out their reproduction, trees and plants and all that kind of stuff. And in my mind, that's like the stasis, so it's like a seed would be what like I would say is the stasis or the stateliness or the pattern or whatever, and it goes into the earth and then is embodied in the earth and becomes manifested, becomes a new thing or whatever. And the earth is like kind of like the novelty, its potentiality, and I know there's some potentiality in the seed. I'm not recognize. I can recognize that, but more what I'm talking about is kind of like the meta structure above all of that. Eventually, you get down to that, and what I mean is like as it emanates down. Listen, like I said, this stuff.
No, just keep going. I don't quite like because there's something that's lining up for you that isn't clicking for me, and I'm kind of interested. So yeah, like why is it a negative? Like why is it a malevolence or like that's kind of I'm not sure if that actually is the root of the words, but that's the idea I get is malevolent is like bad evolution. It's denigrating. It's breaking down into something bad or something less stable or less truthful or whatever. Then and actually in a second I want to see if we maybe talk about truth and talk about that being, or lying and truth, that being kind of the source of evil.
Something
too.
about evil. Yeah.
But yeah, like why do you have the sense that as it's breaking down, it's getting, because that seems to me to have this kind of idea of like a zero-sum game of like every iteration you're just splitting things up different ways. There's not a possibility of like creating more value by harmonizing the new broken down versions of the pattern. Like that's, I was listening to Daniel Schmachtenberger talk to Brett Weinstein on his podcast, and they kind of got to that critical moment, and Brett made it kind of this point of like, okay, in a very, very abstract way. He was just kind of saying like, well, you're just kind of slicing things up differently. Inevitably, you're going to run back to the problem that there's only so much to go around or whatever. And Daniel Schmachtenberger is like, no, there's actually something called synergy, and like synergy is better than the sum of its parts, right? It's where things come together in a more meaningful, more productive, more in a way that brings about something better than any one of them individually could have brought about, and something that's more. It's like that's the whole kind of harmonic, like the symphony ideas, like. And any one of those, like you can break down the melody into smaller and smaller parts, and they can all be beautiful on their own. And it's not just slicing things up in different ways, either having kind of a uniformity of the voices or separation of the voices. It's like you actually get something more beautiful when you have, a combination of oneness and manyness, and like.
Yeah. Well, but that to me is what the breakdown is. I'm not attributing, and that's kind of the rub that I'm talking about where does evil come in? That's my question. Is I believe the pattern emanates down, and there could be denigration, and denigration in my mind. Yeah, I know that's kind of a negative connotation. Maybe it's not the best word, but I guess it lessens or something like that. I don't know exactly how to say it, but and the way that I think about it is at some point as the pattern substantiates itself, it's like you could have, like I was saying, kind of the aberration of this pattern within, like this copy or whatever believes that it is the ultimate pattern. And like kind of going back to what we started with.
Right. Okay.
And so, but that's wrong because it's lesser. It's actually within the pattern.
Right.
And it's like, yes, it is mimicking, and it is a copy of that pattern, but ultimately.
But does it have to be lesser just because it's like subsequent or like smaller?
Well, I don't know, and that's why I said I don't mean it
I guess maybe.
pejoratively necessarily.
Yeah.
See, this is why, like, it's kind of, so you have the pattern of the stasis, novelty, and manifestation, and then on the other side of that, stasis and novelty and manifestation are happening down, but there's that original substantiation, and so then all of it kind of comes down and then comes out like a Christmas tree. And then think about the star on the top.
Okay, yeah, you actually are saying something there. It's just it's big words or big ideas.
But then, so you can imagine, it's like after that original thing of manifestation. See, that manifestation is going to produce that same pattern. But then the pattern, if that pattern that's produced thinks, oh, I'm the pattern that produces, then that's kind of the satanic idea of like, I will be the pattern. But and I know that sounds, and this is kind of weird because we're getting into that kind of odd Jonathan Pajot-ish kind of being and what pattern and being is and all that kind of stuff. Well, in my mind,
part of the idea of being like the recognition of being made in the image of God is identification with the pattern too. Is the sense that like you have to recognize, yes, I am that pattern, but also I'm not that pattern too, or like I'm not all of that pattern.
See, that's the difference between what I'm talking about. Like a pantheism is like everything is God. Like, I mean, my mug is God. No, but it's like this is part of the pattern I'm talking about. It's a different embodiment of that pattern, but the pattern is there, and that's how God is all in all. Is, you can look at a tree and kind of see the same patterns of being in the tree, yeah. So, and believe me, like I'm still, you know, I should have said this from the get. Like I think a lot, like while I'm speaking, it's probably it's kind of a
no. That's honestly the best kind of conversation, man. I don't like. I find I get bored if I'm talking about stuff I've already thought through.
Well, that's one thing with me. Sometimes you get some weird stuff, but so when I'm thinking these things through, so like they're not fully fleshed out. And,
yeah.
And that's why I love this. Like I love talking to you and some of our other friends, and I just devour these kinds of things because it helps me to, cauterize like what I believe, or kind of be able to identify like where something may be weaker, where I may need to see it another way, and of course you throw tons of ideas my way for me to think about, and so I appreciate that. But anyways, but is it making sense at all? Like what other stuff do you see that I may have to come to grips with in this? I know it's so kind of, what's the word? Abstract.
It's vague. It's abstract.
Down.
Well, it's like you have to start. I think the critical point of being able to kind of criticize any of these kind of very theoretical, very abstract ideas is like when you sort of put them into practice and start telling a story, including these principles, then it's easier to point and say, okay, that doesn't make sense. But like as far as kind of what we've been talking about so far, it's like I didn't even. Okay, so I want to get to the truth thing in a second, but I was just kind of looking at off to the side. I saw a little reference to Machiavelli, and I watched a little video about like what Machiavellian actually means, because he was a guy. He was this Italian guy who wrote. I think he's Italian. Yeah, I mean that's an Italian name.
He's a good guy, right?
Well, apparently he wasn't. Like he wrote this book called The Prince. As long as I'm not mixing this up, which I think is basically it was like a manual of like
the guy who sang Purple Rain, right? Hey, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. Was that supposed to be recorded on my screen?
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
Okay,
I got everything recorded on here.
I don't have anything recorded on my end.
No,
so
man,
I was
you're
about
good.
to say, Lord Jesus.
Okay.
Anyways, Machiavelli,
The Prince, Machiavelli, The Prince.
Yeah.
Apparently, was like a book basically just at surface level. It looks like it's a guide for how to. Basically, it's the guide for it's like power, how to keep it, right? And it's like just this like these relentless and really like horrible. It's like a guide for how to oppress and make sure that your government sticks around, and like you have to look at and see every atrocity you might need to commit in order to keep your government around, and commit them all in one fell swoop, or else people are going to kind of beat you to it and they're going to stop you. It's like if you want to keep your power around, it's like it's just he spends a lot of pages really breaking down exactly how to do that well.
What? I'm sorry. My wife came in and she said that my daughter poured water in her craft bag. So she created a new craft.
I mean, yeah, she's just returning it to its primal state.
Primal state, so she can lift earth and stability out of the primordial waters. That's what it is. She's been listening to us too much. Anyway, so
yeah. Well, anyways,
you have to commit them all in one fell swoop.
The Machiavellian, the Prince thing is like people may like you look at it and different guys who ended up committing big atrocities, or like were trying to critique other governments doing really really evil things. They were trying to sort of blame it on Machiavelli and saying, look, they're just doing what he taught them how to do. But apparently, the other way of looking at the book is that he was sort of giving up the plan of almost like a Screw Tape Letters type thing, where he's like saying, this is what evil dictators do. This is the floor plan for how to build a really tyrannical kingdom.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a giving up those plans so that way you can see how the enemy works and watch out for this sort of behavior. But it's the same idea as just like an ego that's not willing to die, and it's just the strategies of how to replicate yourself beyond your due time to die.
Yeah, and that kind of goes down to like trying to extend your body to as big as you are and consume all that you can, and keep all the resources to yourself in a weird way. It's like a gluttony.
Yeah, it's gluttony, it's pride, it's idolatry, it's not tithing, It's not remembering to keep the Sabbath day holy. It's all of the commandments. It's breaking all the commandments.
Dang. Bad boys, what you gonna do?
Anyway, I think
you're breaking them all, man.
I'm running out of thoughts on this. I think this is as far as my brain can go on the concept at the moment, unless you've got something else that we need to try.
Well, you said you wanted to talk about some kind of truth or something like that.
Oh,
about
yeah.
Evil.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do that real quick. Okay. So
spin it. Yeah. I'll listen to you, and then I'll try to like hear you and not say something completely and utterly stupid. Too late.
I think I appreciate you kind of dumb yourself down a little bit too much or beat yourself up a little bit. If you say something that you think is completely stupid, I'll probably find it interesting. So say something stupid after I say this.
Okay, I will.
But
I promise.
But yeah, so if you want to think about the whole character of evil being summed up in lying, that can sort of be the betrayal thing too. It's like when you, because partially, why would you lie, and what even makes it a lie? Because I've been kind of trying to think about and unpack this a little bit too. Like as far as are there times where you should deceive people for the sake of some greater good? Like even that little scenario in The Hiding Place with Corrie ten Boom and her sister. I forget what her sister's name is. But like the Nazis are coming and they're looking for the Jews and they're saying, where are they? And her sister doesn't feel comfortable lying. And so she says, they're under the table. And, the Germans don't believe her because that sounds ridiculous, but they literally are under the table hiding. Like they're under some floorboards and stuff. So it's like that quandary of like, when is it okay? Is there ever an okay time to lie? A lot of people come to the conclusion that there's not a time to lie, but it's like, I don't know if lying is just, I think what lying might be is just, guiding people in such a way that it benefits your plans more than the greater good. It's telling people to do things and teaching them to act in a way that serves your purposes more than it serves the highest good. Right? It's not
also, you could be masquerading it as it's supposed to serve their purposes.
Right.
So
and that's like an even worse kind of lying, right? Where so it's like it's not just because I've thought about the idea that any statement you make about reality is an approximation about it. It's not like you can't actually say anything that's true in the sense that it's summed up the like absolute true existence of the thing that you're describing. You're always kind of like, that's the struggle of communication. You're just kind of babbling around, that's until we have faces things. Like how can we even talk about what we believe, or how can we even be judged by the gods until we figure out what we're trying to say? We have to babble and say a whole bunch of things. It says the title of that book is summed up in that quote. How can we even meet the gods face to face till we have faces, till we figure out what we even mean? Like it's like trying to say what you actually mean is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I mean, you can't even do it. It's like you can do a better or worse job of it, but you can't actually perfectly say what you mean or perfectly describe anything. So like anytime you say anything,
we're always falling short in language.
Right. So and it's like, so we're always falling short in every manner of existence in that, because that's our conception of reality is always an approximation too. So lying can't just be not saying exactly what's perfectly true. Everything that you say is a lie if that's the case. You can't, because you can't describe reality properly. So if it's just describing things not less than perfectly, then you're always lying. So lying has to be connected to something else, and it's probably more to do with, it's looking at reality. I mean, because you could lie to yourself and you can lie to other people, I think. And I think it's like looking at reality or ignoring things that you ought to be focusing on, pretending they don't exist, or intentionally describing reality in a different way than would be best
for your own benefit or whatnot. Well,
it doesn't even have to be for your own benefit, because there's that Cain ideology where it's just you wanted to see the destruction of everything, and so it's not even for you don't even want your own good. You want nothing. You want everything to be dead, but it's just describing things.
That's still in my mind is imposing what the pattern of what you want into the pattern. So it's like you're saying, I want the breakdown of the pattern or of being or whatever, and then you're imposing that will upon reality. And that's an interesting thing to think about. I'll have to dwell on that, but it something that popped in my mind when you're talking about like the whole like, is it okay to lie in the situation where you're like hiding someone that people are going to kill or something like that?
Right.
It's like, there was something you probably heard it, like a lot of Christians say, like, oh, well, if you're like behind enemy lines, like the rules change. And I'm kind of like, well, that's a weird thing. But more so, like recently, I kind of think of like the truth. I think I may have said it earlier, is like almost like a moving target, you know?
Yeah.
But also, it's like, instead of like truth being like just like some kind of objective weird fact, but in my mind, I also think of it as like the aim is true. So it's like, as long as we're aiming true, we're good. We may not be able to get it right, like, you know, we may be peppering the target and not really getting the bullseye, but we're trying to aim correctly. And then you can imagine when you're in a situation like Corey Ten Boom, that you're in an inverted world, like it's where right is wrong and wrong is right almost. So aiming true might be saying, no, there's no people hidden here, or trying to come up with a creative solution. Like I think it was Elijah or someone in the Bible that said, you know, they're like, where is the prophet? And he's like, oh, the man you're seeking is not in the city at this time. And he was standing right outside the city gates. And so it's like, it's that kind of clever, but even you see that in like in Jacob, you know, when he steals the blessing, he does some kind of clever scheme, like where he puts the pelts on his arms and everything. And he was even told to do that by his mother.
Right.
And so there's
I
something,
mean, in that story, are you supposed to see that as a sin or as God's will?
well, see, that's what's interesting, is because God rejected Esau
Right.
and accepted Jacob. So the liar, the liar was accepted. he and through him, like I think we established, right? He's the one that eventually becomes Israel, right? And wrestles with God. And then, I mean, and that's so weird to me, is like through the lie and stealing of the blessing, he was able to take that, and then he became like God's manifest self or body on the earth for that time in a weird way.
Yeah.
There's something to that, and maybe, I know, like,
well,
you
maybe
said,
it's admitting that you have to, like, if you think that telling the truth is actually describing reality perfectly, then you're already really at risk of being a very big liar, or a very big somebody who's going to tell a lot of lies, because you're gonna be at a place where you don't realize that everything that you say
you're going to
is
misrepresent
imperfect.
Because you can't, like, who it's kind of that thing, like, who are you to, what position do you stand in to be able to say that you know what truth is? You know, so it's like you are automatically putting yourself higher in the hierarchy in some way. Like you're saying that you're able to ascertain truth whenever there's so many crazy situations or subjective things and this, that, and everything else. So you're kind of putting yourself, you're exalting yourself in the hierarchy of pattern, Garrett. You're saying, listen, like, the pattern in which I see the world is the prime pattern. Like, it is the world. But the truth is that you're just seeing a small iteration of it or whatever. And that's supposed to point you back up, and, you know, to what I would say in a traditional way, like, it's supposed to point you back to God. It's kind of like Paul, I think, said that all of creation, you know, that people will be without excuse because all creation is kind of exhibiting God's invisible attributes. And I think that's what that kind of means, is like, the symbolism and all that kind of stuff is pervasive throughout, you know, all it's ever present. And and to your point, like where you're saying, like, the whole evil and this might be a way to kind of come around and wrap it up in a way with a bow, is you had mentioned something about my words may be poor, and I'm gonna have to keep digging into this, and we probably will in other conversations to maybe figure out better language for it. But I didn't mean lessening of patterns in, like, kind of like I said, a pejorative way, but I know you were saying, well, like, what makes that evil or this, that, and everything else, and I'll have to think more about that. But ultimately, those patterns do serve the meta pattern. So, like, you were talking about the melodies and everything, it goes back to how I mentioned the Silmarillion, that Melkor's dissonant harmony actually serves a purpose in the choir, and so all these dissonant harmonies are made up for in the all-consuming pattern, and it will all be reconciled in the end. And I don't know what that means even when I say it, but that's kind of the lens I'm viewing the world through right now. And so, so that's why evil is defeated in a way. And like, so it's like, I say evil doesn't exist like at the beginning, but I'm trying to think of a nice little way to kind of
wrap that up.
Wrap that up. It's like, I say evil doesn't exist, and it's like, I guess it just depends on the frame of reference you're looking from, because or if you want to describe evil as like a mimetic type thing, that we embody these patterns that are aberrant, and then we carry out malevolence in the world. Yeah, then if you want to call that evil, then okay, yeah, we can call that evil. And that kind of goes more into like a mimetic devil or some sort of like viral, idea devil, like people possessed by this breaking apart of reality and everything. And that kind of goes into that Petersonian like spirit of the Father, and then how I flipped it and kind of brought out the spirit of evil or whatever. You can look at it that way. And I think that's what's so cool about all this stuff, is it's so rich, and you can find connections in so many of these things, and then play with these ideas and think about them and talk them out and whatnot. But yeah, so evil doesn't exist.
Even though we could spend 2 hours talking about it.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing is
before
nothing.
Before we totally wrap it up. Can you explain the Abraxas thing for 1 second, especially in light of like the lyrics and stuff you wrote for the song?
Yeah. So like Abraxas,
and to break the fourth wall for a second, because we obviously were recording a conversation. We're talking to people who are somebody might watch this, somebody might listen to this. Andrew and I made we've made a couple of EPs before. We like short 5-song, really heavy heavy music
projects.
Yeah.
Well, the first one I think we're going to stick around long with, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
We might even put some more stuff out the other one too, right?
Yeah. I listened to that today, and I was like, man, I want to do another one of these someday.
That'd be fun, man.
But anyway, you've got Old God going on, and one of the tracks in that record is called Abraxas. Why is it called Abraxas? You said that's like this weird lizard god.
Yeah. So Abraxas is, now it depends, I guess, on what you read or whatever. But in Gnosticism, he's like a great, I think the title's like a great archon or whatever. And it's like, he is kind of like an unknowable god. And that's why he's all this cobbled together weirdness, because we can never judge what he is or it is, But in Abraxas, the whole thing is about, I'm trying to remember some of the stinking lyrics. That would very much help. But the whole concept of the song is like, you're looking in the mirror and you don't recognize who you've become. And you're saying the person or the God that created this is some other God. It's a lesser being of lesser material.
Okay, I remember those lyrics.
Making and breaking, twisting inferior. And so like in the lyrics, I go through how like this lesser being, like, which is the demiurge, like kind of how I said, is like he made this fallen human being, like, and then it's kind of like it's a metaphor for like us in our own lives. Like we go, the guiding principle of me, the real me, I didn't screw my life up this bad. Like something else did it. It was a lesser being or a lesser entity or whatever. And they screwed it up. And then but the whole song is kind of about synthesizing that and going like, well, I got off track. Like, can I get back? And if I can't get back, I have to be fine with blazing ahead on a new trail and enjoy that trail. And that's kind of what the song's about. And
so with that, though, like that identification with the fallen forces that have made, I mean, I'm thinking back to my relationship with my own dad, like in that, like he's such a forceful and such I think probably something that he struggles with is like learning when, I mean, he admittedly is working on trying to respect people's boundaries better, but like the other side of that is he's a very assertive person. He's a very brave person. He's willing to stand up for an idea. And that's something that like, it's like that pattern was handed down to me. It's something that I've really identified with. And it's like, I don't usually struggle to just tell people the way I think it is. I've had to really focus on learning how to shut up and how to listen better and how to be more passive or whatever. But like, so it's like the the thing that you're given by that lesser being of lesser material, right? That demiurge, or like the patterns that created you, it's both a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Like, and specifically in the context or the framework of that song, it's like, it's pretty much saying that like the lesser angels of one's being or whatever, or you know, the demons, the inner demons you fight with, like they end up steering you in life, you know. So if you kind of let go of the steering wheel, you can kind of you don't know where you're going to end up, you know. And then it's about looking back. It's about looking back on that and going, well, how did I get here, you know? And not even recognizing the person that you are, that you have become because you weren't driving in a way. And that kind of goes back into those weird, like, kind of beings and like the, you know, like the demon of gluttony or the demon of lust that like exist in us or whatever. And we have to subject that under like a guiding principle, or it can go crazy and become aberrant, you know, and run wild. And that's kind of what it is. But to your point, which is kind of maybe like taking what I'm saying and applying it actually to a deeper thing, or maybe a more full version of that, or expanding it a bit, is I think it's completely true. It's kind of like sometimes what we're handed in life is kind of a mixed bag, you know. It's like, you know, we, even if we have a good life, you know, we still have demons that we wrestle with, or trials and tribulations we have to go through. And in my head, it's like, we have to do the best that we can to get through those things. And sometimes we don't do the best jobs of that. We end up causing more trauma or more trials and tribulations. But I think that you get better at this thing as you go through, if you're genuinely trying. And sometimes people need help, you know, sometimes people need to, you know, talk it out with people, or to, you know, maybe even medicines or whatever it takes, you know, to try to get that alignment and kind of take control, and then be able to blaze a new path, you know, because we can't go back, you know. You can't go back and fix wrongs. You can apologize for stuff and, you know, try to make amends with people you may have harmed and whatnot, but, or even yourself, harming yourself in the past. You know, you look back at your past self and go, man, that dude was a real creep.
Yeah. That
guy really sucked, you know. But then you go, you know what, that guy is me. You know, yeah, I'm different now, and I've kind of evolved or changed and maybe gotten some things more together, but you're never too far away from that lesser being of lesser, because it's the material. It's the same material. The pattern. It's a pattern, you know. I'm just being silly, but no, it is, you know. I mean, and it's like, it's so easy to go to those lesser beings and, like, you know, you become like a feedback loop with yourself.
Right.
And that's not good. But anyways, that's kind of a rough idea of the song. Okay. Thanks for bringing it up, man.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go listen to the lyrics of that song again and actually get it. I've just read it. Every time you sent me these like lyrics and stuff, I would kind of read them and just kind of like get a really general, vague kind of, okay, along with your description of that song, I can write some riffs along with that. I can do that. Yeah. But then hearing, okay, this is the song that we wrote. Okay, that's what it's about. You know.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to unpack some of the lyrics that you wrote for the Trending Now stuff too. Like some of the songs some of the stuff you wrote there is still gets to me, still gets me thinking, and still like.
That's cool, man. I love that, dude. And I'm not trying to. I don't want to come across as like prideful, but I'm really proud of that. I'm so happy that we did that, man. I look back on that project, and of course the project we most recently did, so fondly. You know, I listen back every once in a while, and it kind of surprised myself, because I truly believe that when you write, like try to write genuinely, you know, about what's going on in your heart,
you transcend
your mind,
yourself.
Like, you kind of do, and it's like, and because I listen back sometimes, and I'm like, I didn't mean to like make these little comparisons in this perfect, like in this way. I just was writing down things I thought
that's where it's like
things I was thinking about, and
I get frustrated with like different crazy Christians telling me like, you know, or trying to be like very I don't know, like misdirected. Like whenever you give them a compliment, like, oh, it's all God. I get frustrated with that comment, but there is a sense of like when you really you get into that headspace, stuff happens that's like it's not even you. You tapped into something bigger, and you have to look at that and say, wow, that wasn't me. That's I need to. It's like you have to look at that and say like, wow, thank you Thank you,
Well,
God.
that's like you.
You know,
That's like you with all the stinking music, man. You pooped that stuff out in like 2.5 weeks, bro, and it's incredible. So I mean, you did the same thing, man. You just took it and run with it, and for that, I'm internally.
let me tell you,
grateful,
brother,
dude.
it's all God.
Well, I mean, it's to be silly. It's the pattern is in all things. So it's like
Right.
if you are kind of tapped into that, and you're music very well, and you're kind of just in the project we described, we wanted it just to be fun, cool, no pressure. If it's not perfect, it's fine. We just want it to sound cool. It doesn't have to be perfect or whatever. So I think that looseness kind of gave you that ability. You just kind of went off with it, and like you said, it's like transcended yourself in a way, and you were able to like embody all those.
I wonder
deeper
if even
things
that
in your music.
attitude of like trying to, use what we had, use the skill sets we had, but also just being super relaxed about it. That was maybe part of the vehicle that helped us to tap into it, because it's like there wasn't this sense of pressure of like I have to show off my skill to the best of. It's like you're not really representing it's like you're letting go of your own pattern and saying, oh, it's whatever,
Yeah, you're letting go of yourself, your ego, and going, you know what? Like this is some stuff like in my heart. Like I'm just gonna put it on paper and everything. And that was one thing. It was a Norm Macdonald thing that he said. The comedian Norm Macdonald. He said, I love country music because it's so simple. He said the lyrics are simple, like the good country music. It's like, like he talks about is it Billy Joe Shaver, I think, he talks about like, I'm an old lump of coal, but I'll be a diamond someday. He's like, that's such a simple imagery, but it's such a rich imagery and symbolism. Right. And it's like, it can apply to so many aspects of life. He said, that's what's beautiful. He said, it's the same as a good joke. He said, a perfectly pure joke would be funny on the premise and the punchline. And so that's what he says he tries to do, is almost write a joke where the premise is the same as the punchline. He's like, it's so simple and it applies in so many levels. And then that I took that into trying to write lyrics that were just, I mean, I know the Archon stuff is a little weird, but I try to just kind of be simple with it whenever I was like, writing it in the notes on my phone.
All right. Well, if everybody out there wants to go and hear our new record, go look up Old God on iTunes and Spotify and all the places. But dude, thanks for taking some time and sitting down and record with me, and
it was my pleasure, man.
Spill your thoughts out.
Hopefully, I don't creep out too many people, and we can get together and do it again about other weird topics.
Well, whenever it still hasn't arrived yet, but whenever the Language of Creation shows up in my mailbox, dude, we gotta spend some time going through that book together.
Hey, I'll read it again. I'm about to finish up, about 20 chapters away, but I'm finishing it up now, and I was gonna start reading that book that the last guy that was on. I can't remember his name. I apologize, but the book about evangelicalism and Battled or whatever.
Oh, the Mark Knoll book about evangelicalism.
I think it was a Christian Smith or something. He's from South Carolina, I actually think, from what the guy said. But it's called American Evangelicalism and Battled, I think. I'm not 100%
Oh, yeah, that's
sure,
one of the other ones that he's mentioned. So I haven't read that one yet.
He talked about how it kind of traces like a line of why they're that way and why they seek like conspiracy and kind of. But it seems interesting, so I was going to start reading that probably.
Sweet. Okay, I'm excited. I don't know if he's recommended a whole bunch of books, but I
took note of a bunch of them. I was like, I'm going to have to get to those.
Yeah, no, it's enlightening, man. It's so weird to be part of a tradition and know so little about it.
Exactly.
But anyways, let's wrap it up. We'll do it again soon.
That sounds great, man. I love you, bro.
Well, that was interesting. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to subscribe, like the video. Any kind of engagement really helps out with algorithm stuff as far as I'm aware. Another thing I'd love if you would do would be to share this video with someone who you think might find it interesting or specifically might disagree with it about something or disagree with you about something, and use it as a launch pad to have an interesting conversation, have an interesting disagreement maybe, because that's really what this whole thing is about for me. I think that having, honest disagreements is a really useful and meaningful thing to do. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.